Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hey guys, it's Jory Rose here. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I'm bringing you some extra resources I'd love for you to check out. My fiance, Dr. John Schinner, and I, and by the way, he's host of the podcast, The Evolved Caveman. I highly recommend you check it out. We're hosting a free online summit titled Surviving to Thriving, How We Can All Grow Through the Adversity We're Facing Right Now. Check out the show notes for you to access over 25 top experts from around the world in areas ranging from relationships, money mindset, business leadership, dating, sex, parenting, mindset resiliency, and so much more. And don't forget about my Journey Forward with Jory Rose Facebook group, where I do daily mindfulness videos and meditations. All of that information is going to be in the show notes, and enjoy today's episode. Be well. Hi, this is Jory Rose, and welcome back to the Journey Forward with Jory Rose podcast. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and what a more perfect time as we are all in the midst of this global pandemic, and every single emotion we've ever experienced really seems to be highlighted. As I've been saying during this time, it feels that whatever has been under a flashlight of awareness is now under a floodlight of awareness. Anything that we've been able to simply keep at bay or notice or push under the rug or keep under the radar, the veil is being pulled back, and we are now having no option but to face what we're sitting with, whether that's difficult thoughts, overwhelming emotions, frustrations, irritations, overwhelm, anxiety, fear, anger, stress. All of it is present. And here's the thing. Every single person on this planet is joined together in this common experience. So as I always say with my clients, while you are unique, your problems are not. And there is common humanity in what we're all experiencing right now. And so in today's episode, as I talk about mental health, we're going to talk about many different aspects of what mental health means to you. And we'll follow up by some tools you can do in managing whatever it is that you're experiencing. And I recently was listening to Brené Brown's new podcast. If you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend it. And her first episode, she talks about what she calls FFTs. And she calls them fucking first things. And an FFT is hard because we've never had to do it before. And I love that the timing has happened so that her podcast came out at the very same time that the shelter in place began during quarantining. So she can give this very firsthand example of an FFT. And the reason FFTs are so hard is because we have no working model for them. And, this is something that I've often taught, that when we are stressed, when we are overwhelmed, a lot of it comes into play when we don't have a working model, meaning we've got nothing to fall back on as far as previous experience or precedent to know what to do in a certain situation. And in the way that Brené Brown so beautifully gives us permission to be vulnerable and to feel what we're feeling without judgment and with the courage to look at ourselves. This is a reminder, we have no working model for what we're all going through. So this is where I want to, begin right off the bat, that as we go in and talking about mental health, to really give yourself the compassion for how hard this is. And maybe for many of us, it's quite easy in terms of our day-to-day lives don't feel greatly as impacted. I mean, obviously, we're all impacted by our need to stay at home and our inability to live our normal lives, but how we all go through that is going to vary. So, there's a huge range, whether it goes from severe suffering to much greater ease. And that huge range can also happen from moment to moment. It's easy to assume that how you feel in this moment is going to be where you're stuck forever. And it's easiest to assume that we're going to stay stuck there when the emotion is pain, when we're sad, when we're depressed, when we're feeling hopeless. So again, keep in mind as anything that we're talking about today, and as you're listening, just notice what's it bringing up inside of you. If you're experiencing any shame for what you're feeling, just notice. You're human. It's normal to feel emotions. And there's no shame in feeling the painful ones right now. In fact, it's quite expected. So I want to talk about, as May is Mental Health Awareness Month, I mean, really, what a more perfect time for us to be all aware of our mental health awareness. But I want to break this down because I know what I mean when I say mental health awareness, but what does it mean to you when we talk about mental health? So here's some different ways that I can categorize what mental health looks like. Is it an ability to stay calm during a stressful time? Is your mental health being able to go to sleep easily and wake up feeling well rested or being able to sleep all night through? Is your mental health defined by you having processed your past so you can make meaning of it in the present? Is mental health feeling put together or having your shit all together or feeling grounded? Is mental health being able to name your emotions? Is it about controlling your anger? Is mental health knowing what to do when you're feeling anxious or fearful or stressed? Is mental health allowing yourself to cry and then not experiencing judgment when you do so? Is mental health being able to quiet your inner critic? Perhaps it means to you slowing yourself down to take a few deep breaths. Is mental health being able to have self-compassion? Is mental health having ritual around healing or releasing what's not serving you? Is mental health having a meditation practice? So when I think about mental health, these are some of the different areas that come up for me. And I'm sure you're thinking of more and having so much more to add to the list. But what I want to point out by giving some of these examples is it's not going to be the same for everyone. And also, having balanced mental health or being effective in some of those areas doesn't mean it's going to happen 100% of the time. Because remember, the emotional brain hijacks our logical and reasonable brain when our emotions fire off. So in order to access the tools and the resources to stay balanced, to stay grounded, to stay centered, to me, everything always comes back to awareness of what you're feeling. Without awareness, you're easy to be stuck in denial. It's easy to be stuck in resistance, in judgment. It's easy to just push things away and shovel it under the rug in the hopes that you'll just feel better. In fact, when I work with clients, and especially with couples, and they'll come back each week and I say, oh, so how are you guys doing? How was this past week? And if they say, oh, it was good, things are better, I will also often follow up with the question, are they better because there were no challenges this week? Or are things better because you responded differently to the challenges you had? And oftentimes, more often than not, people will respond by saying, oh, there were no triggers this week, which is great. And I really want to guide people into getting into the place where they can have the triggers and learn how to respond differently to them so the triggers don't take over, they don't lead to disconnection, or they don't lead to anger, or they don't lead to resentment. And so again, it always starts with awareness. Once you have awareness of what you're feeling, not only are you gaining greater self-insight, but you're also gaining a greater ability to attune into others and what they perhaps might be feeling, increasing your ability for empathy and compassion. And that attunement will also give you the ability to have some more effective communication if you're able to notice and be curious. Oh, I'm noticing it looks like you're really disengaged right now in our conversation. Rather than reacting and yelling, you never pay attention to me. So again, awareness, I think, is the root of everything. And if you've been listening to my show, if you've been following me on social media, you know that awareness is the absolute key to the first step for changing towards greater growth, greater authenticity, greater freedom in how we live our lives, to live more fully, to live more authentically. Because without awareness, we are simply on autopilot. So, our mental health might look different in all different categories. But for me, I think this is the starting point of our mental health awareness, is to really get curious and notice what we're feeling. Now, here's the thing. It takes a lot of courage, vulnerability, and compassion to be able to look at yourself lovingly rather than judgmentally, and stay with that curiosity. Because oftentimes what we're feeling downright doesn't feel good. And right now, during this pandemic, there's a lot that is easy to not feel good about. We're distanced. There's a lot of isolation. There's loneliness. Perhaps you're experiencing financial challenges. There's depression. There's sadness. There's anger. There's fear. There's anxiety. And at the root of, I think, one of the things that many people are beginning to experience the longer this goes on are some signs of depression. And if you've had a history of depression, perhaps you're feeling it more. But I also have clients I'm working with that they're feeling this for what feels like to them the first time. And to me, it makes perfect sense. At the root of depression is hopelessness. And right now, it's pretty easy to feel hopeless. We're not really sure what to hold on to. Because so much of what makes us feel safe and secure is to have predictability and normalcy. And this is something I'm hearing a lot of people struggle with, is this idea of, I don't know what to look forward to. I don't know what I can plan for. And hey, when are we going back to normal? And these are really hard questions because I don't think there's going to be a going back to normal. It's rather going to become, hey, what does the new normal look like? In fact, this makes me think about the interview I had with Francis Pichet a couple of weeks ago on the podcast talking about resiliency. And he defines resiliency as, and it's not his definition, but it's the one he uses, so I'll just make that shout out to be accurate. He defines resiliency as the ability to bounce forward. Because we can't bounce back because that's going backwards. And so it's so in alignment with the journey forward, which is we've got to be able to find the ways to bounce forward into a new normal, despite the fears, despite the unknowns, despite the uncertainties. So, there's so many things. So, when we talk about mental health awareness, it's having the courage, the vulnerability and compassion to be able to notice and pay attention to what you're feeling. The next step is to be able to say to yourself, okay, so I'm noticing I'm feeling hopeless. I'm noticing I'm feeling anger. I'm noticing I'm having a lot of fear. I'm noticing that I'm feeling anxious in my body, or I'm experiencing sadness and loss. So once we sit with what we're noticing, the very next step and the next question in this growth in our own mental health is to be able to ask yourself, okay, so what do I want to do with this emotion or this thought or this sensation or this experience. It's recognizing that you have a choice. Now remember, you don't have a choice in what's arising. There's very little that we can control. In fact, this pandemic has highlighted just how little control we have over so much. And perhaps the biggest challenge we have was the perception we've been living in for so long that we have had control. And yet we know the more we grasp and cling and have attachments to outcome, the greater our suffering can increase. So it's recognizing we have a choice in how we respond to what's arising. So mental health does not mean having it figured out all the time. Mental health does not mean you always have the ability to access your tools. Mental health does not mean you have to respond gracefully every single time. But to me, mental health is about the awareness of when you can't or easily access your tools and having compassion for yourself in that moment. And it's not just having compassion for yourself, it's having the compassion for others. Because one of the things that I'm seeing from so many people in my Journey Forward Facebook group, in my clients, in the communities that I am a part of on Facebook and in my personal life, I am seeing there's a lot of struggle right now, and the struggle's showing up in a couple of different areas. One is everything I've been describing so far, which is this relationship to self, the not knowing what to do with the overwhelm of emotions that we're feeling. But it's also showing up in relationship to others. So in relationship to others, one of the areas I'm getting a lot of feedback in is the struggles that couples are having right now. So remember how in the beginning of this episode, I said, whatever was under a flashlight of awareness is under now a floodlight of awareness. Well, this is most true in your romantic partnerships. There's so many things that we can let go, let slide, not pay attention to, or simply stay distracted by. And all of the distractions that we have to either, in a healthy way, not be very present, or maybe there's some more unskillful ways, more destructive ways of distraction or defensiveness, where we defend against what's not working. A lot of those have been stripped away. Our ability to go out with our friends, or go to the gym, or go to yoga, or go out for drinks with the friends, or a concert, or getting away for the weekend, or just simply going to the office every day. And couples are really struggling right now when there has been things that they've been able to just keep under the radar and not have to face. And now, being at home, being together 24/7, not having an easy way to escape from one another, it can increase in a lot of irritability, impatience, ineffective communication. Perhaps you're noticing things that you never noticed about your partner. Maybe things that just boggle your mind. How did I not know this? And within this, as these irritations or impatiences arise, one of the keys to maintaining mental health during this time is knowing yourself, right? Understanding what it's bringing up in you, and being able to ask for healthy boundaries, being able to ask for space if that's what you need. Because it's really easy to go batshit crazy when you're stuck in a house with someone for a super long time. And that doesn't mean they're not the right partner for you. That doesn't mean that you don't love them the way you did before all this started. It simply means that you're human, and it's perfectly understandable that you need some space. So how you go about doing that may differ from day to day. Maybe taking space, even by who gets to choose what you're watching on Netflix tonight. Maybe it's taking a walk by yourself. Maybe it's saying, hey, I just need some time alone in my room to read or to meditate or to exercise. But if we don't ask for what we need, not only are we not advocating for ourselves, but we're also not giving insight into our partner how to show up for us when we need it. And conversely, when we ask for what we need from our partners, we're giving them permission to be able to ask for what they need in return, which is something that right now all couples are needing to figure out. Looking at the patterns and how they've been doing things and recognizing that some of these patterns might need to change. And that's okay. So how can we pivot? How can we shift? And as I always say, shifting doesn't have to be a 90% change. Even just 1% is enough to put you on a different trajectory. So asking yourself, what do I need in this moment? What could I do to help alleviate this anxiety, fear, stress, overwhelm, whatever it is that I'm feeling? But I want to give you this piece of advice. If you're noticing irritation in your partnership, and maybe it's because of what your partner's doing, maybe it's just because of how you're feeling and your irritability is high and your impatience is low, and you're really wanting them to be able to do something differently, such as respond differently to you when you communicate or know what you're feeling. So one of the things I've been working with my clients around is before you go ask your partner what you need. Hey, honey, I need you to listen differently. Or, hey, honey, I need you to know that when my tone of voice is like this, that I'm hurt and I just want a hug. Or, I'm expecting you to know that I need space right now. So I want to offer you guys this. Before asking your partner to do something different, see what you can offer to yourself in your own form of self-compassion. Because oftentimes where we get stuck in partnership is we look to our partners to fill a void within us that perhaps we had from early childhood, perhaps it's an old wound from a previous relationship, perhaps it's a deep insecurity or our inner place where our inner critic is pretty loud. When you recognize you're looking to your partner to fill some of these voids to make you feel better about yourself, get curious on how can I first offer this to myself? So if you're really wanting your partner to give you comfort right now, maybe you just want to vent and give just be held. Ask yourself, how can I offer myself comfort right now? If you're wanting your partner to just get out of the room and give you space, get curious, how can I offer space to myself first? If you're wanting your partner to communicate differently to you and talk with a kinder voice because you find maybe they're irritable and angry and it's hurting your feelings, get really curious on how are you talking to yourself in your own mind and how could you make those shifts? Because I often see that we are wanting our partners to fill something in us that is void. And when it stays void within us, sometimes it can still be hard to receive it. So the inner work has got to start within us before we can ask our partners to give us what we're needing. So again, layers of our mental and emotional health. And it again starts with awareness. Another area that I'm seeing a lot of struggle is with our kids and parenting right now. And one of the things I'm hearing a lot of parents vent or complain about are things like, I've never had to be a stay-at-home parent before. Or I purposefully chose to have a career so I didn't have to be with my kid 24/7. Or, oh my God, the kids are bickering and arguing constantly. I can't handle it. Or, you know what? I don't know how much time my kids should be in front of a device because I can't seem to occupy them all the time. I've got my work to do. I don't know how to be a teacher to them. And I just give up and they're on their devices all day long. And now I feel like a terrible parent. So the first thing I want to say in response to this is where can, again, you offer compassion to yourself and to your kids that we have absolutely no working model to know how to get through this. We have no working model to know how to be a full-time stay-at-home parent, a teacher, a best friend, a coach, a babysitter, a piano teacher, a soccer coach, whatever it is, all of the different people in your children's lives play a role. And being a parent does not mean that you have to be every single role at every single moment. So I invite you to get curious on the stories in which you're telling yourself in your own mind. What are the expectations that you're feeling you need to live up to right now that perhaps aren't realistic and perhaps are not serving you in a capacity to be more present, to be more compassionate, and to be more aware? So some of these stories, and this, goes for parenting, it goes for your relationship, it goes for relationship to yourself. I'm hearing a lot of people say, I can't do this. So let me tell you this. As soon as you say you can't, you've decided you won't. It's that simple. It's a mindset shift. When you say, I can't do this, you have already decided the future outcome. And yet here's the irony. You are already doing it. You are already getting through the things you're saying, I can't do. So here's where I invite the shift. What would happen if you were to say instead, it's hard to do this? When you begin that shift from I can't to it's hard to, not only are you shifting from a fixed to a growth mindset, but you're also offering yourself compassion versus judgment. Both of those things automatically will begin to help you relate to your experience differently. I hear a lot of the stories of, as I mentioned a few moments ago, I'm not a stay-at-home parent, or I didn't sign up to be a teacher. So again, the more you tell yourself that, the harder you're going to have a time in managing the day-to-day. So how could you reframe that story in your head to be one that serves you? It might look like this. I've never had to be a full-time parent, a full-time stay-at-home parent before. And right now, I'm doing the best that I can. That sounds a lot different, doesn't it? Or how about, I'm not a teacher, and being able to shift that to, wow, I have such appreciation for the teachers my kids have always had, because I see this is really hard and I can take it one day at a time. So being able to shift out of judgment, out of frustration, and reframe it into present moment, reframe it into gratitude, makes a huge difference. Another thing that I'm noticing that people are really getting stuck in is it's as soon as their mind begins to wander to the future or wonder what's the future going to be like, it becomes an instant increase in anxiety. And yet the irony is, right now in this moment, you're likely doing okay. It's not ideal. It's not what you thought would happen. And the anxiety increases when the mind gets pulled into the future. So simply again, go back and notice with awareness, oh, look at that. My mind is wandering to the future. Look at how when my mind wanders into the future, I get this pit in my stomach. Look how when my mind wanders to the future, I begin to feel anxiety in my body. Because there's a lot of unknowns. How is it going to be when the world begins to open up its doors again? How am I going to interact with people? How am I ever going to feel safe in a crowd? Will I ever be able to go back to my favorite restaurant? How will I ever get to go to a concert? What's it going to look like? How do I not fear other people? Because I've been trained right now to see people as, I don't know if enemy sounds like a strong word, but to see them as adversarial, as they are potentially someone who can harm my health. So we have to be really careful of these thought processes because it can become very divisive and very fear-based. And it's a hunch of mine that as we get through this pandemic, there's going to be an increase in agoraphobia, which is the fear of being in open spaces, of basically going out of your house and into the public. There's going to be an increase in hypochondria, of a fear of being sick. And there's also going to be a surgence of some PTSD. And if we look at PTSD and we look at trauma as being defined by any dysregulation of our nervous system, we're going to notice how quickly our nervous system gets triggered and feels unsettled and ungrounded at the anticipation of certain things. So we're in quite this paradox of where we're craving the world to open back up, and yet we're noticing uncertainty and anxiety in how we're going to maneuver through that. So I come back to this practice of common humanity. Remember, you're not the only one feeling these things. And that idea that we have no working model. But here's what I do know, is I do know that we're not going back to normal. There's no such thing as normal anymore. It's going to become a new normal. And it'll be awkward at first. Sure, it'll be uncomfortable. We're all going to be vulnerable and uncertain. But the good news is we're all going to be vulnerable and uncertain together. And we are going to adjust. One of the things that has brought me comfort as I talk to clients this most recent week is talking about post 9/11. So pre 9/11, we tended to fly and travel with great ease. You know, going to the airport was not a huge ordeal. It wasn't ideal, but it wasn't a huge ordeal. Post 9/11, it was a big hassle. For many people, they experienced a lot of fear. They weren't sure who they could trust. They weren't sure if flying was safe. And it took some time. But now you go to the airport and you see many changes that weren't there 19 years ago. And it's been enough time that you just know going to the airport, security is going to be a little bit longer. They may check your bag. They may pull your peanut butter out of the suitcase and confiscate it. You have to have your clear plastic bag for all your toiletries. And you just know this going into it. So we never had to do that before, but we adjusted. And it was okay. And the same is going to happen with this. I feel that. How can we not adjust? Because we have readjusted and readjusted and readjusted time and time and time again. That's resiliency. That's common humanity and growth, is we find ways to adapt and to readjust to our surroundings. So as we go through this Mental Health Awareness Month, I invite you to compassionately notice and increase the awareness of what's arising inside of you. And see how you could look at it in a different way. And maybe one that has a little bit more softness, kindness to yourself, creating some space and expansiveness around this emotion or thought, with the reminder that there is nothing wrong with you for feeling what you're feeling. And in fact, the more we can be vulnerable and share our experiences and have the courage to be able to connect with others, we also have the ability to use this as a great opportunity to connect compassionately with the people around us. So what does that look like? Rather than the obligatory pleasantry of calling someone or texting someone, say, hey, how you doing? What would it look like if you were to say, hi, I was really thinking about you. How are you really doing right now? And actually meaning it, meaning that you really want to hear how someone's doing and being open to listening in return. And when they say, how are you? Actually sharing how you're feeling. You know what? I'm having a shitty day. And not only can we do this with friends, but I also think it's important to do this with our kids. The other day, I had a pretty rough day. There was 3 things in a row that all was just like boom, boom, boom. And I was feeling all the feels. And I was sitting in my office on my meditation cushion, and I was crying. And my 16-year-old daughter walked in the room. And she said, Mom, what's wrong? And I just was very honest and said, oh, baby girl, I'm just really sad right now. And look what I did through that exchange. I know many parents would have quickly wiped away their tears. They quickly would have straightened themselves up and pretended like they were okay. But you know what? In that moment, I really wasn't okay. I was sad. I was angry. I was frustrated. I was overwhelmed. I wanted to cry. And so I let myself. And I named it. And I shared it with my daughter. And you know what she did? She sat down next to me and she put her arms around me. And she put my head on her shoulder and she held me. And she said, Mom, it's going to be okay. And I love you. And you know what? She was in the midst of a pretty bad day herself. But my vulnerability of expressing myself so honestly to her not only gave her the opportunity to step outside of her own emotions to comfort me, but it allowed her to continue to have permission to feel what she was feeling. Because I knew she was having a rough day. And up until that moment, she was being stoic. And then she held me when I cried. And then she went up to her room for some quiet time. And she came down a little bit later. And she said, Mommy, I need a hug. And she started to cry. And she actually, a little while later, she says, you know, Mom, I am so proud of myself. I used to keep my emotions in more. And now it feels really good to not have to hold them in. That is mental health. So be aware that mental health does not mean having any challenges in your mental or emotional experience. Actually having health around what we experience in our mental and emotional inner lives. Having health is the ability to take care of ourselves and to nurture and to have rituals of maintaining self-care. Because when I think about being healthy, and if I were to say, what do you do to stay healthy? You know, you probably would answer some generic things like, I eat well, I exercise, I drink lots of water, I don't drink too much alcohol, I don't do drugs, I try to get a good night's sleep. And yes, that's our physical health. And we have daily rituals and routines to maintain that. And we can also have daily rituals and routines for our mental and emotional health. And to me, this is what Mental Health Awareness Month should be all about. What are our daily rituals and routines in which we maintain a habit, a pattern of daily things that we can do to tend to our needs, knowing if we do a little bit every day, it serves long-term goals. You know, if you exercise every day, you're not going to see immediate results, but you still do it because you know it's good for you. So practices like meditation being the foundation of mindfulness, being able to show up with greater presence, greater awareness, getting off autopilot, quieting your inner critic, tuning into your compassionate self. This is what we can form daily routines around. And I have made it a habit and a ritual to do this, not only for myself daily, but for those in my community. So if you are wanting to create more habit and daily routines to improve your mental and emotional health, especially in this month of May, I invite you to do a couple of things. One is my Journey Forward Facebook group. in which I do daily videos, morning meditations, evening mindfulness tools. I do twice a week longer 30-minute meditations. And once a week, I show up present and to answer your questions live. I have gotten so much beautiful feedback that this group is giving people the resources that they need right now to get through this pandemic. But also for the month of May, I invite you to tune in to the Surviving to Thriving Summit, How We Can Have Growth Through Adversity. My fiance and I, Dr. John Schinner, and host of the podcast, The Evolved Caveman, we have gathered together almost 30 experts in different fields of relationships, parenting, mindfulness, business, leadership, positive psychology, resilience, dating, sex, money. I mean, the list is amazing. The people that we've gathered to give us tools how we can grow through the adversity that we're in right now. So we don't just merely survive it, but we come out of this pandemic thriving. That summit is going to launch Monday, May 11th. The link for you to sign up will be in the show notes. And I really am excited. It's going to be absolutely an incredible summit. So there are so many resources that just for me, I am providing to give you tools for your mental and emotional awareness. And it's not just in this month of May. This is my mission. This is my purpose. This is my passion, is to be here in service to guide you to live in greater fullness, greater wholeness, to have better relationships, relationship to yourself, to your partner, to your children, so you can live fully and freely and authentically, where you can experience more joy, more happiness, greater peace, all the while decreasing your stress, your anxiety. And it's time. I think if one thing this pandemic is teaching every single person on this planet is we have the opportunity right now to hit the reset button and to decide how we want to do things different. Because there have been so many things in our lives that we've been doing that likely haven't been serving us. And right now, we've got the time. So please join me in the summit. Join me in the Facebook group. And at the very least, thank you so much for tuning in today to this episode. I wish all of you to be well, to stay healthy, to stay safe, and stay sane.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat, visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.